Jeffrey, welcome to the All Good Books podcast. I'm happy to have you. And first question, how are you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Jared. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to visit Columbia, South Carolina in a couple of weeks and join you all in person. But I'm doing pretty well today. I've had a great day and I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. So I'm doing very well.
No, thank you for doing it. We're excited to have you here soon in Columbia for the Read Freely Fest that we're doing with the Richland County Library. And if I have my facts correct, you know, you are from the South. You're from Georgia. So it's not Georgia where I'm at. We're in Columbia, but you're not far from home or you're connecting the way with home. So you're a Southern boy, is that correct?
Oh yeah, Southern boy through and through. A neighbor grew up in Warm Springs, Georgia, which is west central Georgia. It's where Roosevelt's little White House is located.
Hmm.
He went there for the therapeutic springs decades ago, and a little community was already there, but it sprung up around him really, and that's where I'm from. I've lived in Washington D.C. for a while now, but I'm back in Georgia all the time.
All the time, I love that. That was my next question. When was the last time? But I'll still ask that. When was the last time, since you said all the time? Was it recently you were in Georgia?
I go down a couple. I try to go down once every month or once every couple of months to visit my
Hmm.
family is still there, and my parents. I go down to check on them. It's actually been a little bit longer. We have a sick doggy, and so I've had to stay close to home because of the doggy. But
Oh,
things are getting better there, we hope, and I'll be able to head down to see my parents in the next month.
oh, how's your dog? What kind of dog do you have?
She's a little toy poodle. Her name is Petunia. I haven't told anybody, but she's been kind of sick the last couple of months. But we think things are going to be better soon.
They will get better. I mean,
Thank
well,
you.
full disclosure, people who've heard past episodes know a little thing about all the books to me. I'm surviving and thriving on just hope it feels like these days. So we're hoping things to get better. We know they will get better for
Yeah.
Petunia. How long
Thank
have
you.
you had her? You're welcome.
She's 4.5. She's a baby.
Oh, did you grow
Yeah.
up with dogs?
No, we had cats growing up, and
Hmm.
there was one. We had a bird dog. My brother had a bird dog, a hunting
Hmm.
dog. But we didn't have dogs growing up. Just we had two cats growing up, and they lived for so many years. They were always a constant presence. So, just I just love animals anyway. So, dogs right now.
I love that. You can tell a lot about a person about how they treat animals and their love for, dogs and cats and pets. While we're in that realm and in that space, let's talk about growing up in the South. If you don't mind, like what was it like growing up for you in the South? What was your favorite thing about growing up in the South? A few questions within that one question.
Well, the South is such a wonderfully rich cultural place. There's so much, especially in literature. I love Southern literature, but I'm a classic outsider, I think. I never felt like I quite belonged. I call myself a fringy, so someone who's lived on the fringes of society, sort of looking in and not seeing in the world anything that closely resembles my heart and what I see in the world. And so I always felt sort of an outsider. I never felt like I fit in very much. And I mentioned that I grew up in Warm Springs, Georgia, and you know, the home of Roosevelt's little White House. But for me, it was a stifling, conservative, small community where I just didn't feel like I fit in. Being different, being gay, being. I mean, I have a um, the book focuses on this part of my life. I have a congenital condition. I essentially have a hole in my chest. I have a malformation of the chest. And so that was another reason. I always sort of felt like I was hiding my insides and my outsides all the way growing up. Um, and so when I left home to go to college, which was also in central Georgia, it was it was an opportunity for me to sort of reinvent myself into what I had no idea what that would be.
Mhm.
It was an opportunity to you know see a different part of the world, though just 30 miles down the road. But it was away from home, and that provided an opportunity to, as I said, explore what the world might be outside of my home. And that's how actually the book started to be. It
Mhm.
started, I started writing it when I left home to go to college.
I love that. And the ways that I can relate, connect, I'm a gay black man, a queer black man. So I understand the ways that you can feel you're on the outside. And I know if you're lucky enough or blessed enough, as we get older, as we, get more experiences, get more education, we find creative ways to craft a world that where we aren't the outsiders, we're the main characters of our own story. So I'm happy to hear that. Speaking of crafting and speaking of like going back in the past, like I did a little bit of research to be prepared, but also didn't want to go too far from having a real conversation. You
Mhm.
have had like a diverse background. It wasn't just author, here's my book, here I go. There's so much you've done within the creative space. And let's talk a little bit about that. You were an actor at one point. You had a Super Bowl commercial. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, I was an actor for many years. And I think that's really where I really began to appreciate the power of a good story, a story well told. And
Yes.
I haven't done that for quite a few years, but I think it was good training ground to understand a story arc, to understand, as I said, the power
Yeah.
uh, of telling your truth. So while I was telling other people's stories as an actor,
Hmm.
not my own, it was a good training ground, and that I think really contributed to my deciding to tell my own story, not in a play script form, not on the stage, but in the form of a novel. Uh, it was a wonderful time in my life. I'm so glad that I was able to do it.
Given your acting bona fides and your acting background, indulge me a little bit since we recently had the Oscars. Who would you have cast your vote for? Well, you might be in the Academy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you
I'm
might
not.
be. Okay,
Um,
well, if you were in the Academy, who would you have voted for Best Actress? Let's start with the most important category
oh
first.
my
Then,
gosh. Well, I didn't see all the performances, so I shouldn't be commenting. I think just because of the emotional, nostalgic aspect of it, I probably would have voted for Demi Moore.
for me, it was between her, but I think I would have given it to Cynthia. I'm like, they're singing, she's giving all, Wicked, we
Yeah.
love Wicked. So
Yeah.
no, Demi
There's
Moore,
an
I
argument
thought
for
she was
either
gonna
one of
win
them.
actually. I really thought Demi was gonna win it, but
Yeah.
the young lady from Honora,
Yeah.
Mikey Madison, she came and got it. And that was a great performance
It,
too. So yeah, for
it
sure.
did. Yeah.
What else did you see this award season? You didn't see everything, but what did you see?
I have to say I didn't see very much. I've been so busy with work and trying to write. I haven't seen very much. I haven't been to an actual movie theater in I don't know when. It would have to have been streaming if I'd seen anything.
Oh well, when you come to Columbia, if there's time, we have to take you to the Nickelodeon. It's our local
Okay.
independently
I
run
like that.
art house theater, and they're great. You said you're writing. Are you working on a new book or follow up the Red Clay Susie? What are you working on? Give
I
us a
am.
little sneak peek.
Well, I see Red Clay Susie as a three-book story arc, and
Mm-hmm.
I have a rough draft of the second book, but I've put it away to let it sort of settle for a while. And I'm working on a different book right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is a completely different character, different story, different world. And I'm about a third of the way through having a first rough draft. And I don't want to talk about it too much because it's just not quite ready for that. But yeah, I try to I try to write every day, a little bit every day. Some days I don't make it. I try to be disciplined, but on the weekends I do. I devote a lot of the weekend time to writing, and then in the evenings I try to spend a little bit of time after dinner, at least, you know, doing something. If not writing, rereading something that I've already put on page, uh, just to sort of keep the writing muscles working. And I find that the more one writes, it's sort of like priming a pump, and more ideas come out. Um, so that's the reason it's important, I think, for me anyway, to keep at it. And I don't wait for the muse to come and settle on my shoulder and tap me and say, okay, it's time. It's time to write something, because that muse doesn't always show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to make a practice of it, even if what I come up with isn't inspired, doesn't feel inspired, at least I'm doing it. And I think that's really the way to get stories out, to make them a reality, take them from your head and put them on page.
It's an excellent practice. I grew up singing, and it's one of the things I
Oh,
don't do every day. But I was always told use it or lose it. So I may not be doing vocal warm-ups, but most times I always hear my mom's voice or my different teacher voices like
Uh-huh.
sing something, even if it's not giving, defying gravity. Use that muscle, use it or lose it. So I think it's a
Yeah.
healthy practice. Connecting to what you do as an author, and you just mentioned stories. Why is it important to tell the story that you told in Red Clay Susan? Why is it important for you to be an author to tell your stories?
Well, Red Clay Susie is, I think of it as a roadmap of sorts for fellow fringies, people who, like me, have always felt that they live their lives on the outside looking in and not recognizing themselves in anything that they see. Um, and it's also because I had a really rough time of it. I hid it very well, but I did. I struggled. And there's actually a statistic which is sobering.
Mm,
And it's from the Trevor Project. And the Trevor Project does a lot of research and they offer these statistics every year. They update them every year. And
mhm,
one of them took me by surprise, and that is that LGBTQ youth, 41% of them seriously considered taking their lives by suicide
mm,
last year. And of that number, 14% actually attempted it.
mm.
And that's just heartbreaking. And so I decided that telling my story, which is in the end an uplifting, affirming story of the message is you don't have to be perfect to live your life. You don't have to be perfect to be happy. And I wanted my story to be out there as an example of that. And, when I was in writing it, was healing for me as well. It was an expunging of my insides. I've come to think of it as um, an exorcism by exposition.
Mhm.
So it was good for me, but I also hope that it's good for those people who read it, people of all ages. I have had people of all ages come up to me, and I thought it was for young people, but I've had even grandparents come up and say, I have a grandchild who just came out. I have a
Mhm.
grandchild who's transitioning. I have a grandchild who this or that or the other. And I'm not sure what to say.
Mm.
And it gives me the opportunity because of this book to say, all you have to say is, I love you. No qualifiers, nothing else. They just want to know that you love them.
I
And
think
so
it
that's
reminds me
why it's
there's no
wonderful.
different than human. I mean, we all want to be loved and hear those
Yeah.
words from family, friends. And I'm sorry for interrupting. Finish your thought.
No, just that's I think I was just saying that's why it's been important for me to tell my story for myself and for others.
It's a very important story, in my personal opinion. And
Thank you.
given, the wisdom that we all gain as we get older and as we have different experiences, and just speaking for yourself and not for anyone else or not for a publisher or organization or anything, do you feel like we're moving forward in, making things better for those who may feel in the fringes or those who identify as within the LGBTQ or maybe LGBTQ themselves? Do you feel we're moving forward? And I won't really leave you out there because sometimes I do worry because I'm almost 40. But when I think about how things are when I grew up in the 80s and 90s and like the progress that's been made, I do think about sometimes about like, the current state of culture we're in, like are we moving forward? Are we moving backward? Are we still in the same spot? Like, what are your thoughts or thinkings on where we are culturally as it relates to those who may feel they're on the fringe or are fringe or LGBTQ?
I like to think, and I do believe that there are these safe spaces, these havens somewhere within these concentric circles of humanity that we live in. And so, yes, I believe that there are places that uplift marginalized, at-risk people. I don't think that we're doing a good enough job of it. I think the literary community does a really good job of it. I think that organizations, so for example, part of the proceeds from the sale of Red Clay Susie go to support two organizations, the Born This Way Foundation, which is Lady
Yes,
Gaga,
Gaga.
yeah, Lady Gaga,
Yes.
her mother, Cynthia Germanata, and also the Trevor Project, which I mentioned. And so that's my commit. What can I do? What can I do? I think that's the question each person should ask themselves. What I can do is I can put my story out there and I can give part of the proceeds from the sale of that book to these two organizations. But we've got a long way to go, and especially given, the world we live in today, we have harder work to do.
Absolutely. Some days I wake up, I'm like, Lord, I'm tired. But I mean, based on, but think about what you just said and listen to what you just said. It's like, like my grandma say, like, you have no reason to be tired. You have to keep going because there's so many others coming behind us, whether they're LGBTQ or not, like we have to pave the way. So I'm glad you put your story out there. Shifting gears a little bit, because one of the things that I've mentioned to you before we started recording, and one thing we do on the podcast for those who listen to our podcast, the All Good Books podcast, I like you to have a little insight into the author, the person who wrote that amazing book they love, who crafted those incredibly cool characters. You are a senior advisor for the Library of Congress. First of
Mhm.
all, that's an incredible cool job. And what is that like? And what does that entail being a senior advisor for the Library of Congress?
Well, it most of what I do is I solve I help solve problems. I'm
Hmm.
a sort of one-stop shop for managers who have, something that they need resolved and they need to get some support on that, some guidance. And so they contact me, and I've been there for a little over 20 years now. So I know a lot of people. And so I typically, not always, but I know who to call, or I can call someone and get a reference. Like, who do we call to get the answer to this question or solve this problem? So I'm a connector of sorts and a problem solver. And then the other thing that I do a lot of is writing. I do a lot of writing, different from my novel, but writing things like talking points or letters or memos or things like that. And it's a job that I really love. And I just love helping people. It's part of what I think I do well naturally, and I enjoy it. So it's a perfect position for me, and I think a perfect position to be in if you're a public servant.
I love that. I love that you view your advisory role as being a public servant. And I see a through line, in my opinion, and through my eyes, being a public servant with that position, but also, giving people a gift and a guide with your book. With Red Clay Susie, going beyond, you know, giving people that starting point, what we would want, like, just letting people know that they are loved. What do you want people to take away from the book other than, that? What else is something that you hope people glean or gain from Red Clay Susie?
Well, there's an author's note in the book, and I think that that author's note really sums it up beautifully. I hope, and it goes something like this: bullies are paper predators who have no more power over you than you give them. And once you realize that, then they lose their sovereignty. And it's as if a gentle wind just comes along and just lifts them at the edge and blows them away from you. I want folks to know that it is the quality of one's heart and mind that matters most, and that one's body, even with its imperfections, perceived or real imperfections, is precious. It's beautiful. And to treat it with as much kindness and care as you are able, so that it will take you as long and as far as it is able. But I think the most important message of all is that love, true love, is never wrong, and to bravely bestow it on whomever is worthy of it. Those are the things that I wish that I had known when I was younger. And if I could magically sort of creep back in time and whisper something into my ear of my younger self, that's what I would say. I would say those things.
I think that's beautifully said and well put. And last two questions, I'm gonna respect for y'all. It's Sunday, and so I know everyone's like relaxing. I'm assuming Jeffrey wants to relax too. But last two questions. One, as someone who had bullies myself growing up, and since you mentioned that, looking back on the past and where you're at now, given your success and the work you've done and the life you've crafted for yourself, um, I will make this a yes or no. Yes or no. Have you triumphed or succeeded or, had that own revenge in a way over your bullies? Have you triumphed and defeated your bullies from where you're standing now?
Oh, do I have to answer yes or no?
No, go, you definitely get more if you feel for sure.
I think that surviving is To survive is to triumph. To be creative is to be courageous. And I've tried to live finally with courage
Mhm.
and by writing the book with creativity and by talking to people like you who love literature as well as is a wonderful way to just continue on that road that I finally found, that road of survival.
I
Yeah.
love that answer. I definitely love that answer. I think so many young men and women and those who are non-binary will hear that and just know it's something that Bevy Smith says. It gets greater later. So I love that. I love exactly what you
Like
said.
that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like keep living, like you said, keep surviving. My grandma would say too, like, oh, you think you know, just keep living, but keep living and get better later on. There's just something about going back to the art of the story. Time is the best storyteller. So thank you for that. And last question. Other than your book, your incredible debut novel, Red Clay Susie, what three books do you recommend to all good book listeners? Like what three books other than your own, which is number one, of course, we all should be reading Red Clay Susie. But what three books have your attention or what three books do you recommend to our listeners?
Wow, what a great question. Oh my gosh, I wish I'd thought about this more. Well, there are the classics, there are always the classics to go to, but I would
Mhm.
like to mention some that are more contemporary. There's a book by Rashid Newson called My Government Means to Kill Me. And I
Mm.
read it, and then I met Rashid. I've been on panels with him talking about our books, and it's a very important and beautifully written book. So, My Government Means to Kill Me by Rashid Newson. That's one. I'm going to look at my bookshelf and see what I else can.
No, I love
In,
that. I love your
uh,
haircut too. Yes.
oh, thank you. Um, Gosh, there's so many good books. I would say another one which I read a while ago
Hmm.
is Let's Get Back to the Party by Zach Sala.
Oh,
Salih. And that's quite a beautiful book too. Both of those are LGBTQ themed books. And I will go to a classic for my last one. My favorite book is The Gastronomical Me by MFK Fisher. It was
okay.
written many years ago. I'm not even sure when, how long ago, but many, many, many years ago. And she's deceased now. But it taught me many years ago how to be okay being alone.
Mm.
And I actually took it with one of the things in it is uh, that it taught me how to do is to go to a restaurant by myself and have a meal by myself, which at the time was very important lesson for me to learn, and that was many years ago. So, The Gastronomical Me by MFK Fisher.
I think those are great recommendations.
Thank
Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time and for those listening. And listening to this interview right now into the All Good Books podcast. You can catch Jeffrey next at the Read Freely Fest here in Columbia, South Carolina. The Read Freely Fest is being held by the Richland County Public Library, and Jeffrey will be there with his book, giving you insight and wisdom into that world, and also just sharing things, hopefully like what he just shared with us in the podcast. But Jeffrey's incredible. He was so kind to communicate with as far as scheduling the interview, and I cannot wait to meet you in the flesh at the Read Freely Fest, Jeffrey. So thank you again.
you. I'm looking forward to seeing you all in Columbia.
Yes, absolutely. All right.